I didn't realize a smile could be a lock until my son used one on me. Eli leaned across the doorway of my own living room like a bouncer, grinning in that way teenagers do when they're hoping charm will hold a wall. Music thumped from the other side, cousins shouting, glasses clinking, the warm buzz of a family party carrying on. My hands were full of napkins and a plate of sliders. "Move," I said, light as helium, the tone I use with clients when a ribbon won't cooperate. "Mom, wait," he said. "They're doing a toast." "Who's they?" I asked. I lifted the plate. "You think I'm afraid of carbonated speeches?" He glanced back into the room and then at me, and something in his face made the napkins feel like sand. Eli is 6 feet of decent kid with the posture of a bridge, built to carry other people. He shifted, still smiling, still blocking, and that told me more than words. A door isn't a door when your own son stands in it like a human barricade. I angled my body and eased by his arm, shoulder to the frame. He reached out as if to steer me, fingers warm against my elbow. "Mom, seriously?" I went in anyway. The living room had the glow of a furniture catalog. Candles, polished oak, laughter bouncing off framed photos of vacations we once took. On the far side of the room, on my grandmother's rug, Keith stood with a champagne flute. Beside him, Mira, 24 in a sheath dress that looked like it whispered every time she moved, was wrapped along his side, one hand tucked into the pocket of his blazer like she owned the space. They were laughing at something the entitled relative had just said. Alyssa, his sister, a woman who treated gratitude like a coupon that had already expired. Alyssa raised her glass. "To new adventures," she sang out. "Keith and Mira, our power duo." The conversation stitched themselves into silence, the kind of quiet that isn't about politeness but calculation. Faces tilted toward me as if I were a late arrival to a joke. I watched my husband's mouth curve. He had the kind of smile that left a trail, like tire marks on a driveway. "Come on," he said to me, his tone soaked in performance. "You know I've done this for years, right under your nose." Mira's hand squeezed his pocket. She didn't look ashamed. She looked like a person posing with a prize. Eli's breath brushed my shoulder from behind. "Yeah, Mom," he murmured, a low confession. "Everyone knows. She's like our second mom." Something in the room tilted. Frames stayed put, but my center of gravity took a step sideways. The napkins went onto the coffee table. The plate followed. I nodded once, like the host of a show thanking an audience. A few relatives tried to read my face. I gave them the same expression I reserve for a florist who forgot the peonies, the one that says, "I will handle this, but not here." I walked through them without touching anyone. My heels clicked across the rug's edge and then the tile of the hallway. I passed the mirror where, an hour earlier, I'd adjusted mascara and told myself I had a good life, even if it had become a life where a calendar reminder was more faithful than a marriage vow. The porch door sighed open. Outside, the garden wore string lights and the shy color of evening. Crickets tested the air like a sound check. Before we deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. I set my palms on the railing and breathed through a smile. My name is Rowan Delaney, and I run a small event design company that can turn a garage into a winter gala, a church basement into a lakeside retreat. I believe in lists, logistics, and electricity. I was not going to cry at my own party. I cataloged the assets the way I'd inventory rentals after a wedding. Keys, accounts, passwords, safe deposit box, the backup drive in Keith's office labeled with the boring title, Q4 Archival. I thought about where each one lived and how loud they would be when I moved them. Eli came out and hovered near the herb planters. He was trying to look casual about the fact that he had just buried me with a sentence. "You okay?" he asked, voice thin. "I'm fine," I said. Go finish your slice of cake." "There's no cake yet," he said, then realized how that sounded and flinched. "I'm sorry." "You're 18, I said. "Your job is to learn. Mine is to teach." I tucked a strand of hair behind my ear, watching a moth orbit the lantern by the door. Lesson 1, never warn me twice. "Mom, go back in, Eli." He nodded, a boy whose loyalties had been split by a magician. He pushed the door open and disappeared into a burst of cheers. I stood there until the laughter reshaped itself into a harmless blur. Then I went to the garage. The night had the clean smell of cut grass and gasoline. I slid into my Subaru, the practical one with a coffee stain ghosting the passenger seat, and I drove. No theater, no dramatic fishtails, just the steady forward motion of a person following a checklist. Our office building sat 3 miles away, a square of glass and brick beside a dentist and a yoga studio. I knew the code. I knew the quiet hour. Inside Keith's office, the world was beige and brittle. He liked dignity in his decor, which meant framed degrees, a leather chair, and a clock that clicked like a fingernail. On his shelf was the external drive. I took it down, felt the small weight of stored years. I had put the files there, after all. The labels were mine. So was the foresight to keep a second one at the studio where I worked, because I have learned to expect surprises in both life and client budgets. I slid the drive into my tote beside a roll of velvet ribbon and a bag of tea lights. The computer hummed. I sat, logged in, and opened a folder called Travel. It was a costume trunk of excuses. Hotel confirmations, lift receipts, calendar screens. I sent copies to a new address I had made a month earlier when my gut started speaking in subtitles. Rowan.notesproton. I set a script to sync automatically. I cleaned my fingerprints from the mouse as if I were neatening a centerpiece. On my way out, I paused at the whiteboard where he wrote goals in a good teacher's handwriting. Expand client base, strengthen partnerships. In a different marker, down in a corner where someone might mistake it for a doodle, I wrote, Update. Partnerships are stronger than you think. When I pulled into our driveway, the garden lights were dark. The party had ended without me. A plastic cup floated in the bird bath. I unlocked the front door and walked through a house that looked staged for a sale. On the kitchen island sat a stack of paper plates like a toppled coin roll. In the sink, a fork waited. I turned off one light, then another, and the stillness smoothed itself across the rooms. My phone buzzed as I kicked off my shoes. A text from Nessa. You want me to leak what she posted on her private account? I stared at it until the words became a flickering moth. Nessa had a way of finding things out, the way rain finds gutters. We met in 8th grade detention, me for correcting a teacher, her for climbing the auditorium rigging for fun, and never let go. I typed, not yet. Then I erased it. Then I typed, what did she post? Nessa replied with a screenshot. Mira's profile name in a peach font. The caption under a photo of a champagne flute and a wristwatch that wasn't hers. Some promotions are more fun. My thumbs went still. I could already hear Alyssa tomorrow, calling to ask how I could be so cold, as if temperature were the sin, not the act. I poured water into a glass and sat at the dining table, a long rectangle of wood that had absorbed years of homework and centerpieces. The house made small sounds around me, settling like a sleeper adjusting. I opened my laptop. I made a list and named it Air. Not fire, not water. Air. The thing you learn to manage so it sustains you. Close his business card account. I had co-signed at a time when faith felt like common sense. Move the savings from our joint rainy day fund to the trust for Eli we'd discussed but never built. Contact a collector who had once asked about the Jaguar. He'd left his number on a coaster at a fundraiser. A neat script that meant money. Change the locks. Call on Monday, schedule for Tuesday. I wanted the door to announce new rules. Backup of backup. Put the drive I took into a safety box. Create a mirror in the cloud. Cut into small pieces like jewels you hide in the hems of dresses. I wrote until the list felt like a staircase. Then I stood, washed the glass, and went upstairs to the guest room, not because I was retreating, but because I wanted the bed he didn't share. My grandmother's quilt smelled like cedar and distant summers. At 3 a.m, I woke with a sentence fully formed. When a man tells you he can do it right under your nose, he's telling you where to aim. I lay there and watched the dark soften, and knew that anger, if you let it, will pick the color and the font. I decided I would pick them. The next morning, I wore a black jumpsuit with pockets deep enough for plans. I went to the bank. I need to remove a card holder from a business account, I told the woman behind the counter. She had the posture of a person who has heard every version of every story and a sweater the color of oatmeal. I have the documents. Of course, she said. We can do that. Afterward, I called the number on the coaster. The collector's name was Daniel Paxton. He remembered the car and remembered me because men often remember a woman who keeps a room steady. We arranged a price that made me smile into the wind. You want cash? He asked. Certified check, I said. Made out to Delaney Family Trust. Nice name. It's new, I said. At noon, I stopped by my studio, a rectangle of light and concrete with paint-splattered floors and a wall of vases. My assistant, Claire, looked up from a box of taper candles. You look like you slept, she said, surprised. I slept like a contractor with a signed permit, I said. We're going to rebrand a little. Cleaner lines, fewer apologies. She blinked. Okay. Also, if anyone asks, I'm unavailable until Wednesday. Is everything okay? It will be. Back at the house, I parked the Subaru in the street to leave the driveway open for Daniel. I spread a tarp in the garage. I gathered Keith's keepsakes into boxes: bow ties, cufflinks shaped like anchors, the framed photo from a fishing trip with his father where he looked like a man who'd been handed a script and the wrong stage. I labeled each lid in my neat floral shop handwriting. Neat letters make chaos less persuasive. Eli came home from a shift at the coffee shop and found me sitting on the step in the garage. His hair looked like he had run through rain, though the sky was clear. "I didn't sleep," he said, which was both apology and defense. "I figured," I said. "How was work?" "Busy," he said. His eyes moved to the boxes. "Is this everything?" "No," I said. "Just the things that don't belong to the house." He stood there, chewing on the inside of his cheek, a habit he'd had since he was small. "I shouldn't have said what I said," he whispered. "You told the truth," I said. "Just not the right way for your mother." He sat beside me. The concrete held a rough coolness. "He told me not to tell you. He said it would ruin the vibe." He made little quotation marks, and the sarcasm sounded like a young man trying on my shoes. "You didn't ruin anything," I said. "You confirmed I'm not crazy." "You were never crazy, Mom." "Good," I said. "Because today I sold a car that wasn't technically mine." His head snapped. "What?" "Daniel's coming by in an hour. I have the title. He signed it over to me 2 years ago when he needed my credit for a new lease. He never took it back." Eli looked impressed and concerned, which is how I wanted him to look. "Is that legal?" I said. "Yes. Kind? Debatable? Necessary? Absolutely." He laughed without humor. "Mira posted a story last night," he said, stumbling on the word. "It was smug." "I saw," I said. "Are you going to do something?" he asked. "I am doing something," I said. "I am assembling the truth and putting it where it can be seen." He nodded like a student who'd just been shown the trick behind a card illusion. "I can help," he said. "You can," I said. "You can go be 18, take a walk, think about college, think about who you want to be when you're not standing between other people's choices." He swallowed. "I love you." "I know," I said, the 2 words that mean more when they're not stretched into a speech. Daniel arrived in a suit that tried to look casual and failed. He walked around the Jaguar with reverence. "She's perfect," he said. "She's a car," I said. "Perfect is for people, and even then only on holidays." We signed papers on the hood. He handed me the certified check, and I slid it into a folder labeled with the trust name. He drove away with the kind of carefulness that looks like relief. I watched the taillights and felt something unspool inside me. Not grief, not joy, just space. I went back inside and sat at Keith's desk. The monitor winked awake to a landscape photo of a lake he'd never been to. I opened his email. He was sloppy. Most people in love are. The password had our anniversary in it, plus an exclamation mark as if passion were a punctuation rule. I created a new folder in my anonymous account, Mira. I copied messages into it. Mira's notes, calendar invites, the dinner he had scheduled with a client marked mentorship. I found a set of screenshots Mira had taken of her own messages, bragging about controlling the boss, sent to a friend with a string of emojis like confetti. I scheduled them to forward to the board 2 hours before their next meeting. No commentary, just facts. As the sun did its slow westward slide, I left the office with the restraint of a stagehand. I returned home and made a simple dinner: pasta with garlic and oil, salad with lemon. Eli ate quietly, checking his phone and then putting it face down like a person building a new boundary. When the dishes were done, I took my keys, kissed his temple, and said, "I'll be back late." "Are you going to Nessa's?" he asked. "I'm going to be invisible for 2 days," I said, which for me is the same thing. I drove to Keith's office again after 9. The night security guard was a man named Tom who collected jazz records. He waved, and I waved back, carrying a tote that said, "May contain miracles." In the stairwell, the lights hummed. The hall carpet had the pattern of a hotel that wanted to apologize for other hotels. The door to the suite clicked open beneath my keycard. The open concept layout looked like a set after the actors have gone home. Chairs at angles, pens standing at attention in cups, a lone sweater on the back of a chair. I crossed to the server closet. I had seen the diagrams. I knew the backups. I unplugged the redundant drive, slipped it into a plastic bin, labeled the bin Donations, and left it by the door with other bins that always seemed to migrate toward the exit like turtles. I did not create anything false. I didn't have to. Misuse of company funds is like glitter. You think you vacuumed it all, and then the sun hits a corner, and there it is. He had expensed dinners that were not client dinners. He had billed travel that was not travel. I created a spreadsheet with links to the receipts and the photos they were taken beside. I left it in a folder titled Compliance Review, because sometimes the sharpest knife is a label everyone is afraid to open. When I heard footsteps in the hall, I slipped into the break room and stood behind the door. 2 voices carried past, a pair of analysts discussing fantasy football and whether oat milk could be trusted. They passed. I waited a minute for the air to relax and then continued, slow and precise. At midnight, I locked his office and went to mine across town. I backed up the drive I'd taken into another cloud vault. Then I drove to a self-storage place where the units looked like a row of pastel mouths. I rented a 5x7 and put the drive into a box with old vases and a stack of folded linens. It felt right there, tucked among things that had survived their first life and were waiting for another. By morning, I was a roomer in my own life. I sent Claire a text that I'd be offline. I sent Eli a heart and a thumbs up. I didn't check my personal account. I didn't give myself the small relief of other people's outrage. I didn't need it. Outrage is confetti. It looks pretty, and then you vacuum for a week. On the second night, I parked behind the office again and watched lights blink across the glass. From this angle, you can't tell who sits where. You can't tell who holds what. You can only tell that people are inside being versions of themselves. I opened my burner email and saw what I was waiting for, the automated message with the board meeting invite, forwarded from Keith's inbox because a rule I'd created told it to. Tomorrow at 9. I forwarded it to the anonymous account that would deliver the screenshots 2 hours beforehand. I added a subject line in a neutral tone, for your awareness. I closed the laptop and leaned my head back against the headrest. The car smelled like gum and determination. I thought of Mira's laugh. I thought of Alyssa's toast. I thought of how my husband's words had slid out like a trick coin and landed face up, generous and ugly. And I thought, again, of air, of how a person learns to breathe in a room that has been secretly remodeled around them. When I got home, the porch light cast a quiet circle. The house felt like a stage after curtain call. Boxes waited in the garage, labeled and patient. Eli's shoes sat by the door like punctuation marks that end a sentence but keep the story moving. My phone buzzed again with Nessa's name. You want me to leak what she posted on her private account? I stared at the message for a long moment, the way you look at a switch and know it will change the light. Then I typed, "Send me everything first." The little dots appeared, then, "On my way." I closed my eyes, counted to 5, and when I opened them, the room was the same and I was different. Lesson 1. Never warn me twice. Nessa showed up before sunrise with a paper bag of pastries and a face that had opinions. She let herself in because she always did, humming a melody that didn't belong to any song. You look like you slept on an idea, she said, setting the bag on the counter. I did, I said. It was firm. She nudged a croissant toward me. You want me to post the champagne photo or save it for a bigger beat? Save it, I said. I'm doing a quieter thing first. Quieter than me? She asked, mock offended. 2 days of not existing, I said. Then the noise will be easier to steer. She watched me as I poured coffee and took stock of my kitchen the way I do before a large event. Surfaces clear, paths unobstructed, exits known. You have a plan for the car? Done, I said. Of course, she said. How about the accounts? I slid the certified check across the island like a card in a game we'd been playing forever. I'll deposit it into Eli's trust at 10, I said. By lunch, I'll have moved the rainy day fund. Nessa leaned her elbows on the counter. He posted, she said softly. Her too, matching captions. My hands didn't shake. I had made a decision in the night. They'd get only the motion of my work, nothing of my tremor. Let them narrate, I said. I'm writing the program. She smiled into her mug. That's what I always liked about you, she said. You treat pain like it's a room. You rearrange it until it makes sense. Rooms behave, I said. People take longer. She left with a promise to wait for my text. I drove to the bank with the check and a folder of documents. The manager, a kind man named Andrew, read everything twice because he looked like the sort who had learned that reading something twice saves time later. We opened the trust. We moved the funds. He asked if I wanted alerts set to my number only, and I said yes in a tone that closed the topic like a lid. By noon, I was back at my studio. Claire had arranged vases on the work table like a skyline. Alyssa called, she said. What did she want? I asked, knowing. To ask why you're being icy, Claire said, making the quotes with one hand while balancing a tulip with the other. I told her to send her questions in writing, I said. If she calls again, tell her I'm in a consultation with a bride who prefers emails, Claire smirked. You are my favorite person. Get in line, I said, and she laughed. At 1, I met with a new couple to discuss a fall wedding. I didn't let my voice hitch. I walked them through colors, linens, seating flow, the way light changes across a room as the day moves. Work is polite. Work doesn't gossip. Work takes your hand and gives you something to hold. At 3, I went home, changed the passcodes on the alarm and the garage, and set the lamp timers to a schedule that made it look like a woman named Routine lived here. I packed a tote with basic clothes and my laptop and drove to Nessa's apartment. She keeps it like a stage manager keeps a cue book. Everything labeled, everything within reach. Everything ready. "You can have the office," she said. "I'll sleep on the couch." "You won't," I said. "You'll sleep in your bed and snore through your nose like a metronome. I'm not here to rearrange your life. I'm here to be fog." She gave me a look that translated to, "I love you," and then she left me alone. I went to work on the digital end. The burner account held the folders I'd built. I set a rule in Keith's inbox to forward the board invite to me and then to a new address that would, at a precise time, drop Mira's messages into the board's collective lap without comment. I attached metadata and timestamps because facts travel farther when they wear a clock. Then I dug into his expense reports. I had a copy of the little magic door he used for uploads, dates, merchants, signatures, the photo of a receipt often taken beside a watch or a sleeve. People love to frame their habits. I matched the charges to his calendar. Mentorship dinners at a place where mentorship comes with a dessert cart, midweek hotel stays during weeks when his meetings were all local. I didn't invent anything. I didn't need to. I lined them up like a row of tea lights and lit each with a match called context. I made a second spreadsheet titled Reconciliation. I linked every entry to the original source. I wrote a short preface in language a compliance officer would respect. Please see attached summary of personal use charges tagged to 6542. All items have supporting documentation attached. No adjectives. Adjectives argue. Verbs prove. At 9, I left Nessa's and drove to the office park. The guard at the gate was a woman with a paperback and the kind of boredom that has learned to knit. I waved my visitor badge and she waved back, too tired to notice my face or too kind to care. Inside, the hall smelled like copier paper and lemon cleaner. My shoes made shy sounds on the tile. I felt calm, a strange raft on a choppy lake. The suite door opened and closed without comment. I left my tote under a desk, took only the thumb drive and the little camera Nessa swears by, something small and legal that simply remembers things in sharp focus. The server closet hummed. I breathed with it, matched its pace. The rack was stacked into a small skyscraper of silver faces blinking their prepared stares. I pulled the drive that held last month's mirroring, the one meant to save the firm from fire or carelessness. I set it in my tote. In its place, I inserted a fresh drive and let the sync start. Not sabotage, insurance of a different kind. In Keith's office, I went through drawers with the same patience I use when untangling fishing line at a lakeside venue. Inside a false bottom organizer lived a set of gift cards and a notebook full of notes to himself about which clients liked bourbon and which preferred artisan tea. On the last page, a list of restaurants with initials beside them. M appeared beside entries that matched his late-night receipts. It could have been Martin, it could have been Monday, but one entry read, "M, try the fig tart," and I knew it wasn't a weekday. I photographed the pages, returned everything, and sat at his desk to set another rule in his inbox. Forward anything with board, audit, review, or compliance to my burner. He wouldn't notice. Men like him don't notice the invisible as long as the visible applauds. On my way out, I heard voices and froze near the kitchenette. 2 junior staffers walked in, laughing about an influencer who'd booked their firm for a brand launch and then canceled because the moon phase was wrong for personal growth. They poured coffee, talked about fantasy basketball, and wandered out again in a drift of after-hours energy. I waited until their chatter dissolved into the carpet and then moved quietly to the exit. Back at Nessa's, I showered and stood in her clean white bathroom with a towel wrapped like a private truce. I looked at my face and saw a woman folding herself into concentration. I put on an old t-shirt of Nessa's that reads, "Stage crew, we fix it live," and slept on her guest bed like an assistant on a 15-minute break. Eyes shut, mind inventorying power cords. Morning came with a message from Claire. "Clients are asking if you're available for Thursday walkthroughs. You want me to book?" "Book," I wrote back. "And bring the dusty blue swatches." She sent a thumbs up. Eli sent a photo of his breakfast and the dog from the coffee shop he'd befriended. I sent a heart and asked about his shift. He replied with a single word, "steady," which felt like he'd taken a pulse and liked the result. By afternoon, social media had a shine to it. Keith posted a photo of a patio table with 2 glasses and the caption, "New Beginnings." Mira posted the same table from the other side, the same caption, a different filter. Alyssa commented with a string of fireworks. I didn't engage. I let it float down the feed like a helium balloon at a parade. People would look up, point, and then go on with their lives. Balloons don't change laws. Documentation does. I sent Nessa a text. Hold your leak. Tomorrow is better. She replied, tell me when to light the fuse. At 6, I went back to the office for the second night. Habits make a path. I wore soft-soled shoes, tied my hair back, and moved through the building like a housekeeper who knows which doors stick. I left a manila envelope on the CFO's chair. Callum Reese, a man with the kind of quiet that makes a room think twice about its own noise. Inside, my reconciliation, the photographs, the gift card inventory with dates. On the outside, I wrote, from an employee who believes in standards. Then I sat in the reception area and listened to the quiet. The quiet in offices at night has layers, air vents, the occasional printer waking itself like a cat, the ping of an elevator bell a floor away. It's not silence. It's a chorus of small agreements. When I was sure I could move without bumping into anyone, I went to the mailroom. There, on the shelf where outgoing packages wait for pickup, I left a second envelope addressed to the board chair's home office. Inside, the screenshots. The ones with Mira crowning herself project manager of the boss. The ones where she wrote, he folds when I smile. No commentary. Just a clean printout, clipped to a cover sheet with a list of dates and hyperlinks. On my way out of the building, I saw myself in the glass of the lobby, a woman with her shoulders back, carrying a tote like a small archive. The guard glanced up from her paperback. Long night? She asked. Seems like everyone's got a long night these days, I said, and she nodded like we shared a union. Back at Nessa's, I opened my laptop, checked that my automations were set, then closed it before I could start spiraling into micro-edits. I lay on the guest bed and stared at the ceiling fan. I counted rotations like breaths. I let the 2-day project settle into place inside me like furniture that finally looks right after you've tried it in 5 different corners. On the morning of the board meeting, I woke before my alarm and made coffee strong enough to teach a class. I put on black jeans, a gray sweater, and my grandmother's ring, the one with a tiny opal that catches light like a secret. At 8:30, the burner inbox pinged with the forwarded calendar invite. Board, quarterly review, 9 a.m., it said. I forwarded it to the drop address I'd coded with Nessa's help. The clock read 8:42. The package I'd left for the chair would reach the courier hub by 10. I drove past the building at 8:59. Through the glass, I could see silhouettes taking chairs. People who make decisions like to sit early. I parked across the street in a space half in shade, half in sun. I leaned back, rolled my shoulders, and watched my reflection in the rearview mirror, pale, clear-eyed, the kind of woman who knows where the outlets are in any ballroom. At exactly 8:58, my phone lit with a private notification from an app that only shows up when you've set it to. It confirmed the rule had executed. Attachment sent, time-stamped, delivered to the board alias. No commentary. Just an action log like a heartbeat on a monitor. At 9:03, a second ping. The compliance folder I'd labeled at midnight had been opened by an account with a name I didn't recognize. A good sign. People who count things were counting. People who ask only when forced were being forced to ask. I let my head rest against the seat and looked at the building. Windows squared into a grid of quiet. Birds made moth shapes against the sky. Somewhere inside, a printer did the start-stop rhythm of a machine that thinks it's a metronome. I took one slow breath, then another, and imagined each board member reading words they didn't want and understanding that, in the end, the story was simpler than anyone wanted to admit. A person thought he was untouchable because people let him be. And my phone buzzed again at 9:17. It was from Keith's account. Well, from mine, inside his, an alert I'd set to send to me. The subject line, FWD, for your awareness. He had received what I wanted him to receive, right when I wanted him to receive it. I pictured him at the table, the practiced smirk evaporating into something he hadn't planned for, the room holding its breath in that polite way professionals do when the topic is about to slide into the center like a platter no one ordered. I pictured the board chair clearing his throat and saying, "We've had some items brought to our attention." I didn't smile, I didn't fist pump. I did what I always do when a set change starts on time. I checked my next cue. My next cue was to remain invisible. I dropped my phone into my bag, started the engine, and eased away from the curb. Minutes later, as I hit the first red light, my phone vibrated again with a copy of something that had just landed in his inbox. A meeting invite stamped in corporate blue. Closed session, immediate 10:15. The location field, Conference C. The sender, the board chair's assistant. I didn't need confirmation to know what came next. But then a third alert arrived from the rule I'd tucked into Keith's account, the one that forwarded any email containing board or audit. Subject, please attend, questions Ray Q3 personal expenses. I let the light turn green twice before I moved. In the rearview mirror, my face was a study in still water. 2 days of silence had done their work. The morning after the board meeting, I woke up to the sound of my phone vibrating against Nessa's wooden desk. Not the urgent buzz of one call, a rolling series of notifications like 1,000 polite knocks on 1,000 doors. I sat up slowly, half expecting my pulse to stutter. It didn't. Calm feels strange when you've trained your nerves for crisis. I opened the first message. You seeing this? From Claire, followed by a link to the company's public relations post. Restructuring announcement, leadership realignment. Keith's name appeared in the third paragraph. Words like strategic review, role transition, and collaboration opportunities tried to soften what was really being said. He had been quietly demoted. The position of chief client strategist had been reassigned to interim management oversight, the kind of phrase that looks professional and tastes like a closed door. I scrolled further down and saw a photo taken at the event. Keith in his navy suit, standing beside Mira, smiling through discomfort. The caption, celebrating new directions. His face said otherwise. The photo captured the faint tension at his jaw, the stiffness of someone who realizes the audience can see through the curtain. My hand didn't shake as I set the phone down. 2 days of silence had ripened into consequence. I dressed carefully. White shirt, gray blazer, the kind of outfit that whispers I'm working, not watching. Nessa followed me to the kitchen in her robe, holding a mug of coffee like it was her weapon of choice. He's trending on LinkedIn, she said. That's new. Corporate gossip has found its hero. Not hero, I said, taking a sip from my own mug. Example. You going in? I'm going to the event. I was supposed to attend anyway. The product launch? Exactly. Want company? Always. The hotel ballroom was a cathedral of ambition, soft jazz, glowing uplights, and people pretending to be impressed by hors d'oeuvres. My event company had handled the decor, silver runners, minimal centerpieces, glass candle holders lined like soldiers. I slipped through the crowd, invisible in the way only a planner can be. People talk freely around those who hold clipboards, not realizing we remember everything. At the far end of the room, Keith stood near the press backdrop, surrounded by colleagues trying to measure whether it was safe to stand near him. Mira lingered close, smiling too brightly, her lipstick a shade too confident. I recognized the look, a woman performing control while the stage shakes under her feet. I positioned myself near the bar. Nessa leaned beside me, her earrings catching the light. Well, she whispered, look who just lost his title. Wait for it, I said. Right on cue, the CEO took the microphone. After a few words about the company's future, he gestured to the crowd. And to our new direction. We're thrilled to have Callum Reese joining us in a greater leadership capacity. His dedication to integrity and transparency has inspired us all. Callum stepped forward, face calm, expression polite. He nodded to Keith, who attempted a clap. The kind of slow, forced rhythm that sounds like denial dressed in manners. I felt a ripple of satisfaction so subtle it could have been mistaken for a sigh. Across the room, a murmur spread, the sound of people realizing the hierarchy had shifted. Words like reassigned, consultant role, temporary leave floated like gossip confetti. Mira's hand rested on Keith's arm, a little too tight. When the applause faded, I caught Callum's gaze from across the room. He tilted his head slightly, acknowledgement without exposure. I leaned toward Nessa. Time to go. Already? The show's over, I said. Outside, on the marble steps of the hotel, Keith's voice found me. Rowan. I turned. He was alone now, jacket unbuttoned, eyes like wet asphalt. Congratulations, I said. Don't do that, he said. Do what? That smug thing, acting like you didn't plan this. I raised an eyebrow. I didn't plan your actions, Keith. You manage those yourself. His jaw clenched. You're not innocent in this. Never claimed to be. Mira appeared behind him, her heels clicking sharp as punctuation. You don't understand love, she said, words fast and trembling. He actually loves me. I looked at her, young, confident, terrified. Then I hope he treats you better than he treated me, I said, and when she laughed, a brittle, nervous sound, I did something I hadn't planned. I reached out and slapped her, not hard, not with rage. A clean, deliberate sound, the kind that turns a scene into silence. Everyone nearby froze. Nessa's breath caught, but I kept my expression steady. That's not anger, I said to Mira. That's closure. Mira's face flushed, her composure cracking in public view. She spun away, muttering something about crazy wives and jealousy, disappearing into the hum of voices. Keith stared at me, his face colorless. "You just made things worse for yourself," he said. "Worse?" I asked. "You really think there's anything left to lose?" He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You don't know what you've started." I smiled, small and tired. "No, Keith. I know exactly what I started. You just didn't notice when it began." I walked away before he could answer. That night, Mira's social accounts went silent. Her bright captions and stories vanished like erased chalk. The next morning, online whispers began. Screenshots of internal emails, a few tagged posts from anonymous employees suggesting misconduct. I hadn't released anything yet. People were just connecting dots. Truth is contagious that way. By noon, I received a message from an unknown number. Unknown. You don't know me. Unknown. I think I can help. Unknown. CR. I didn't need a decoder. Callum Reese had finally decided to step out of the shadows. We met at a cafe tucked behind the financial district, the kind of place where deals hide behind espresso foam. He arrived precisely on time, calm, efficient, a man who measured his words before letting them leave the room. "Mrs. Delaney," he said, extending a hand. "Rowan," I corrected. "Rowan," he said, "you built a storm." "I just turned on the wind," I said. He smiled faintly. "You're not wrong. Keith's been on the edge for months. But now, the board's looking deeper." He slid a folder across the table. These are internal chat logs. He and Mira discussed selling the client list to a third party. Not illegal, technically, but highly unethical. I opened the folder, scanning the messages. The lines were undeniable. Coded phrases, private channels, messages like, "Once we secure the list, we can leverage for new investors." "This will finish him," I said quietly. "It'll finish both of them," Callum said. "But it has to go public." I looked up. "You want me to leak it?" He shook his head. "I want you to know what you're capable of before you decide how." "Why help me?" I asked. "Because I hate seeing talented people get crushed by the arrogant," he said. "And because he underestimated the wrong person." I closed the folder and stood. "Then let's make it viral." That evening, when I got home, headlights swept across my driveway. I froze, then relaxed when I realized it was only the reflection of my own security lights. But when I reached the porch, I saw the truth. Boxes. His clothes, shoes, cufflinks. Every symbol of his presence neatly packed, stacked like a message. And there, at the door, stood Keith. He was wearing the same navy suit, now wrinkled. "You changed the locks," he said. "Of course I did," I said. "You can't do that. This is my house." "It was our house," I said, "until your lawyer reads the deed. You'll find it says otherwise." He stared at the boxes, then at me. "You think this makes you powerful?" "No," I said softly. "It makes me free." He kicked one of the boxes. "You ruined everything." "Keith," I said, steady, calm, "you did that the day you decided truth was optional." He started to say something else, but Eli appeared at the top of the stairs, barefoot, his voice low. "Dad, stop!" For a long moment, no one moved. Then Keith turned away, muttering under his breath, and got into his car. The tires hissed against the asphalt as he drove off into the dark. Eli came down slowly. He looked different. "He is," I said. Everyone looks different when the mirror finally tells the truth. That night, as rain tapped the windows, I opened my laptop and drafted an email to Callum. "Let's begin tomorrow." Then I sat back, breathing evenly, staring at the garden lights outside. The silence wasn't heavy anymore. It was earned. The email went out at dawn, and by mid-morning, the city hummed with a low, curious buzz. In the corporate world, silence is suspicion, and Keith's inbox had become an echo chamber of both. The review committee had suspended his consultancy contract pending investigation. I saw it all unfold from my studio. Claire and the team prepped a floral installation for a weekend wedding, and I stood near the window, trimming eucalyptus leaves with more precision than emotion. My phone kept lighting up on the counter, texts from acquaintances, coworkers, even one from Alyssa. "You didn't have to humiliate him publicly. Family handles things privately." I didn't respond. I never do when people rewrite what privacy means. At noon, Nessa arrived with lunch and a grin. "Your Storm's front-page gossip," she said, setting a salad down. "He's telling everyone you forged documents. Meanwhile, his assistants vanished into the internet void. It's poetic." I smiled faintly. "No, it's logistics. She's scared." Nessa leaned on the counter. You're planning something else. I can see it in your face. I'm inviting her to dinner. She blinked. You're what? I'm going to make peace. Or at least look like I am. Nessa laughed, loud and short. You've finally lost it. Maybe, I said, but people listen more when they think forgiveness is on the menu. 2 nights later, the table was set like an apology wrapped in satin, candles at measured intervals, linen folded into perfect thirds, wine breathing quietly in a decanter. I'd chosen music that knew how to stay in the background, instrumental jazz, soft, reasonable. When the doorbell rang, I glanced at the clock. 7:01, punctual. Guilt often is. Mira stood there in a beige coat, eyes hidden behind sunglasses, though the evening had already faded. Her hair was sleek, her smile uncertain. You actually invited me, she said. I don't bluff about food, I said. She hesitated at the doorway like a cat sniffing an unfamiliar room. You're not recording this, right? If I were, I'd pick better lighting, I said. Come in. She followed me to the dining room. Her perfume, sweet synthetic confidence, filled the air. She looked around, noting the small details, the framed photos of Eli, the fresh flowers, the absence of anything that used to belong to Keith. This is nice, she said carefully. I didn't think you'd want to see me. I didn't, I said, pouring wine. But then I thought, maybe you deserve to hear my version before you spend the rest of your life thinking I'm a villain. She sat, clutching her glass. I didn't plan to hurt you, Rowan. It just happened. That's what everyone says when they've rehearsed the lie, I said, sitting opposite her. Tell me something new. She looked down at the tablecloth, tracing the weave with her fingertip. He said you didn't care anymore, that you were married to your business. I let the words sit between us. He told me you were ambitious. That's the only thing he was right about. She lifted her head. You think I wanted your life? You think I wanted to be you? No, I said softly. You wanted to be seen. You mistook his attention for light. Her face trembled. Anger, embarrassment, both. He promised me partnership. He said he'd divorce you. I sipped my wine. He promised me loyalty. See how that worked out for both of us? Mira laughed then, a small cracking sound. You're cruel. No, I said. I'm deliberate. Dinner unfolded like a negotiation. She spoke of dreams, her own event brand, her desire to travel, how she thought he'd invest in her. I let her talk until she grew comfortable, until her voice softened into the tone people use when they start believing they've been forgiven. Then I slid the envelope across the table. Dessert, I said. She frowned, opening it. Her expression shifted from curiosity to panic in 2 breaths. What is this? An eviction notice, I said evenly. The apartment you're staying in is legally under my shell lease. Your name was never on the deed. You have 7 days. She blinked rapidly, shaking her head. You can't. I can, I said. You're living in property I own. Consider this severance. Her lip quivered. You set me up. I prepared, I said. You're confusing foresight with malice. She stood, voice rising. You're insane. I smiled faintly. Maybe, but at least I read the fine print. Her chair scraped back, the sound sharp as a blade. You'll regret this, she said, snatching her coat. Perhaps, I said, sipping wine again, but not tonight. I had tipped off a local blogger anonymously an hour before she arrived. By the time Mira stormed out the front door, flashing lights popped from a car parked across the street. Cameras, questions. Mira, any comment on the review? Are you still with him? She turned, face pale under the porch light, then bolted down the path. The reporters followed, shouting into the night. I closed the door quietly, setting my glass on the counter. The house returned to silence. 10 minutes later, my phone rang. Keith's number. Rowan, he said, voice tight. What did you do? I had dinner. She's gone. She called me crying. They froze my line of credit. Maybe that's the universe suggesting restraint, I said. He exhaled sharply. You think this is funny? No, I said. I think it's balanced. You always had to win, didn't you? He said bitterly. I didn't win, I said. I just stopped losing. He didn't reply at first. I could hear background noise, a car door, a muffled voice. Then he said, They're turning on me, the board. Callum's behind it, isn't he? I wouldn't know, I said. But if he is, maybe he's just tired of covering for you. You won't get away with this, he said, his tone half threat, half plea. I smiled into the receiver. You already taught me how to get away with things, Keith. I just paid better attention. He hung up. The next morning, I walked into my studio and found Claire staring at her phone, eyes wide. "You're trending," she said. "I'd rather not," I replied. "No, not you." "Her. Mira. She was recorded leaving your house last night, shouting something about legal action. People are dissecting every frame. They found her old posts about him. It's all over the feeds." I exhaled slowly. Public interest moves fast. It'll burn out soon enough. But it didn't. By afternoon, gossip sites were calling her the intern, who thought she won the lottery and got taxed instead. Keith's company issued a vague statement about personal matters. He hadn't been fired yet, but everyone could sense it coming, the final unraveling disguised as a procedural review. That evening, Callum texted, "Board meeting in 3 days. You should be there." I typed back, "Front row?" He replied, "Center seat." That night, I stood in my kitchen, the same room where the plan had first been born, and felt a quiet weight lift. For years, I'd built events that ended in applause, cleaning glitter off the floor while everyone else celebrated. Now, my own life had become the kind of story people whispered about over coffee, half pity, half awe. I didn't want applause. I wanted accuracy. I poured a glass of wine and looked out the window. The reflection of my face hovered in the glass, still, steady, slightly amused. Behind me, my phone buzzed once more. Another message from Callum. "Next phase begins tomorrow." The invitation sat in my inbox like a riddle I already knew the answer to. Private networking dinner, hosted by Delaney. No company logos, no assistant's name, no RSVP link, just a time, a place, and a tone that reeked of desperation hidden behind manners. Nessa leaned over my desk when I showed it to her. "You can't be seriously thinking of going." "I'm not just thinking," I said. "I'm planning." She raised both brows. "You realize this sounds like walking into a trap." "I designed the lighting," I said. "I can find my way out." Nessa sighed, long and dramatic. "You're lucky I like you enough to wear heels for revenge." The restaurant was one of those expensive illusions. Dim gold light, menus without prices, staff who glided instead of walked. Every table looked like a promise someone couldn't afford to keep. Keith had reserved the private hall upstairs. From the foyer, I could already hear his voice floating through the air. Polished, charming, the tone he used when he thought charisma could still fix things. "Smile," Nessa whispered beside me. "You're about to introduce the finale." "Finales are easy," I said. "It's the quiet before them that's tricky." We stepped into the room. There were maybe 15 people, clients, investors, 2 journalists pretending to be casual. Keith stood at the head of the long mahogany table, sleeves rolled, glass in hand. He looked older than he had 3 weeks ago. Fear will do that to a person. It edits the confidence right out of their posture. When he saw me, his mouth tightened, but his voice stayed smooth. "Rowan," he said, performing surprise. "Didn't expect you to come?" "Sure you did," I said, moving closer. "You sent an invitation." I RSVP'd. A few guests glanced between us, confused, sensing undercurrents, but not yet the tide. Keith gestured toward an empty chair near the end of the table. "You're welcome to stay, as long as we can be civil." "Civil," I repeated. "That's your favorite word when you're cornered." Nessa poured herself a drink from the bar cart like a stage extra with perfect timing. "Carry on," she said. Keith cleared his throat. "Everyone," he announced, "thank you for coming tonight. There's been chatter online, misunderstandings, but we're here to focus on new opportunities." He motioned to a display screen behind him, glowing with slides about rebuilding trust and vision forward. The irony could have lit the room without electricity. I let him talk for 10 minutes. He was good at it, voice modulated, gestures controlled, eyes bright with false conviction. Then he opened the floor for feedback. That was my cue. I stood, slow, steady, and every conversation paused. "I do have feedback," I said, voice calm. "You forgot to mention integrity." He froze. "Rowan, this isn't..." I held up a small stack of printed pages, screenshots, emails, message threads, all neatly highlighted. "You taught me presentation matters," I said. So I printed mine. I walked around the table, setting a copy in front of each guest. "These are from your so-called mentorship chats," I continued. "Between you and Mira Lane, I removed the emojis for everyone's comfort." A nervous laugh rippled through the room. Someone shifted in their chair. The journalist's pens moved faster. Keith's face lost its practiced calm. "You're out of line." "No," I said. "You were out of line. I'm just making sure everyone sees where it was drawn." He started toward me, one hand out. but Nessa stepped subtly between us, holding her glass like a prop. "Careful," she said softly. "You're being photographed." Keith blinked. And yes, across the room, one of the investors had a phone angled just right. Callum's contact, no doubt. The silence turned thick. Someone coughed. The CFO's voice, calm and firm, broke it. "Mr. Delaney, I believe we need to review these documents privately." "I agree," I said, "privately and publicly. Transparency works both ways." Keith's eyes darted toward me, sharp as glass. "You think this is justice? It's humiliation." "Sometimes," I said, "they overlap." The dinner disbanded faster than any event I'd ever planned. Guests murmured excuses, eyes down, loyalty evaporating in the humid air of scandal. Within minutes, Keith stood in the corner alone, phone lighting up his face in flashes of incoming messages, the digital sound of fallout. Nessa squeezed my shoulder. "Well," she said, "that went cleaner than expected." "Clean is relative," I said. "He's not done." We were right. An hour later, as we walked to the parking garage, his voice echoed from behind us. "Rowan." The steps were quick, uneven. He caught up, face pale, eyes bright with panic more than anger. "You can't just destroy everything I built," he said. I turned. "I didn't destroy it. I documented it." He reached toward me. "Give me the phone. The files. Whatever you've got. You think this will make you look good? You'll look bitter. Vindictive." Nessa stepped closer, body angled slightly between us. "Careful," she murmured. He ignored her, moving closer, his hand almost touching my arm, and then Eli's voice came from the shadows near the elevator. "Don't touch her." We both turned. My son walked out of the dim light, taller than I remembered, face calm but set. He must have followed the news. Maybe Nessa told him. Maybe he just knew. Keith stopped, his expression flickering between surprise and something older, the awareness that the room had shifted for good. "Eli," he said, forcing a chuckle. "This isn't what it looks like." "It looks like you cornered my mom," Eli said. His voice was steady, quiet. "Step back." Keith hesitated, then laughed softly, false bravado. "You're overreacting." I pulled my phone from my pocket, opened the camera, and hit record. "He's not," I said. Keith looked at me, realization dawning. "You're recording this?" "Just like you recorded your own downfall," I said. He froze. The moment hung suspended. 3 people, 1 hallway, the hum of fluorescent lights. Then he lowered his hand, his face folding into something small, defeated. "I hope you're happy," he said. I didn't answer. Happiness wasn't part of the contract anymore. Eli stepped beside me, shoulders squared, eyes locked on his father. "You should go," he said. For the first time, Keith listened. He turned, walked toward the elevator, and disappeared behind closing doors. Nessa exhaled. "That was cinematic," she whispered. I looked at Eli. "You shouldn't have been here." "I wanted to be," he said. "I saw what he did to you, Mom. Someone had to say it out loud." I touched his arm. "You already did, remember? You warned me. That was enough." He smiled faintly. "Guess we both learned from him. Just in opposite directions." When I got home, the air felt different. Lighter, thinner, as if the house itself had been holding its breath. I made tea, the way I always did when I needed to remind myself life was still made of small, steady rituals. Then my phone buzzed again. A message from Callum. Subject, final piece body. Proof attached. They sold shares using your identity. Legal, but unethical. The board will act. I thought you should have it first. I opened the file. The documents were clear. Signatures, transfer forms, timestamps. Every lie had a receipt. For a long time, I just stared at the screen. Not triumph, not anger, just the quiet understanding that the story was nearly done. Tomorrow would be the meeting, the real ending. I closed the laptop and looked around the house, now fully mine in ways that mattered and ways that hurt. Outside, the wind pressed softly against the windows. The world didn't care who was right or wrong, it just kept turning. But I cared, and I would finish this on my own terms. Morning arrived, like a held breath finally exhaled. The city was wrapped in soft gray light, clouds low, streets still damp from a night shower. I brewed coffee and sat by the window, watching the reflection of myself in the glass. Calm, deliberate, steady. The kind of woman who now signed her own name on every piece of paper that mattered. On the table sat the folder Callum had sent. Transaction records, internal memos, signed forms. Proof that Keith and Mira had sold small company shares using my digital signature. Not enough to be criminal, but enough to brand them as dishonest in a world where reputation was the only real currency. At 8:15, I locked the folder into my bag and drove to the office building downtown. Traffic pulsed slow and predictable, each stoplight offering a moment to breathe. I wasn't nervous. Nerves belong to people who aren't ready. The boardroom smelled faintly of old wood and new coffee. Polished table, 12 leather chairs, a projection screen dark and waiting. Callum was already there, flipping through a binder, calm as ever. "You got it all?" he asked. "Everything," I said, placing the folder beside his. "With timestamps." He nodded once. "They'll want to hear it from you." The board members trickled in one by one. Neat suits, cautious expressions, the kind of practiced neutrality that only executives can perfect. At 9 sharp, the chair tapped the table. "Let's begin." Keith entered last. He looked like a man trying to carry an invisible load. His tie wasn't straight. His eyes darted once to me, then away. He took the seat opposite mine without a word. "Mr. Delaney," the chair began, "we've reviewed the material you and Ms. Delaney provided." I stayed quiet. They didn't need me yet. The chair continued, reading from a prepared statement. "There is sufficient evidence of personal misuse of company funds and misrepresentation of ownership during share transactions. While no laws appear broken, ethical standards were breached. Effective immediately, Mr. Delaney's position is terminated, pending a full financial review." The words landed without echo. Keith's face didn't change at first. Then the mask cracked just slightly. "You're basing this on her word?" he asked. "No," Callum said evenly. "We're basing it on your numbers." Silence settled like dust. Keith turned to me finally. "You win," he said quietly. I met his gaze. There was never a game. He opened his mouth to say more, but the chair had already moved on, discussing procedural matters. I tuned it out. It wasn't my fight anymore. I was just here to close the book. When the meeting ended, Callum walked me to the elevator. "They'll audit everything," he said. "You won't need to lift another finger." "I wasn't planning to," I said. He smiled faintly. "You did what most people only dream about. You took your story back." I shook his hand. "Thanks for helping me write the last chapter." "Just promise you'll rest," he said. "I'll redecorate instead," I replied. "Rest looks boring." Outside, the sky had shifted from gray to silver. I walked to my car with the slow certainty of someone returning home for the first time in a long while. At the house, Eli was waiting on the porch, a man now instead of a boy. "It's done?" he asked. "It's done," I said. He handed me a pen and a folder. "The final paperwork for the house. They sent it over this morning. You just need to sign." I sat on the porch step, flipped through the pages, and signed my name, Rowan E. Delaney, with the kind of precision that makes ownership feel like peace. Eli smiled. "You're really keeping it." "I built this life one wall at a time," I said. "No one gets to evict me from it." We watched the movers unloading the last of Keith's things. Boxes labeled with his name, a few suits on hangers. Everything neat, contained, irrelevant. The sound of tires on gravel made me look up. His car rolled to a stop at the curb. "Mom?" Eli murmured, half rising. "It's okay," I said. Keith got out slowly. His voice carried the exhaustion of someone who had run out of versions to tell. "You don't have to do this in front of him." "I'm not doing anything," I said. "You are." He looked at the boxes, then at me. "Where am I supposed to go?" "You're clever," I said. "You'll figure it out. You said she was like our second mom. Maybe she can raise you now." Eli stiffened beside me, but he didn't speak. The movers kept working, quiet professionals in the middle of an ending. Keith's mouth opened, then closed again. The fight had drained out of him. "You were always colder than I thought?" he said. I shook my head. "No, I just stopped setting myself on fire to keep you warm." He stood there for a moment, rain beginning to sprinkle across his shoulders. Then he turned, got back into the car, and drove off without another word. Eli watched the taillights disappear beyond the trees. "Do you feel better?" he asked softly. "Not better," I said. "Just clean." We carried the last box inside, the sound of the rain steady and patient. When the movers left, I stood by the open door, looking out at the wet driveway. The garden lights flickered on automatically, small points of gold against the gray. For a long while, I just listened to the rain, the kind of sound that forgives without asking. Then I closed the door, locked it, and leaned my back against it, exhaling all the air I'd been holding for months. The house was quiet except for the ticking of the kitchen clock. I walked to the counter, poured myself a fresh cup of coffee, and watched the steam curl upward like the last ghost of something finally leaving. I thought about every moment that had led here. The party, the laughter, the humiliation, the plan. The version of me who smiled through betrayal was gone, replaced by someone sharper, steadier, alive in a different way. In the reflection of the window, I saw my own faint smile. Not joy, not triumph, just truth. Keith once bragged about doing everything right under my nose. Turns out, I learned to breathe fire.